So I moved here because of toys, and we can get into that later. But why and when did you move?
Mega size hot coffee お願いします。Okay, at some point in the late 90s, around 1998 and 1999, I was introduced to anime for the first time. And that anime was Dragon Ball Z. At the time, there wasn't a whole lot of anime coming out of Japan into the United States, as there were in other countries like parts of South America and Europe. So Dragon Ball Z and a handful of others were all that we got. So it was through Dragon Ball Z that I really started to get into Japanese anime and manga. I was already a fan of Japanese film, as I was already a fan of Godzilla movies and samurai movies. But there was something about Dragon Ball Z that really drew me in. Not only me, my brother, and a lot of my friends as well. And that led to us picking up things like the Dragon Ball mangas, as well as other mangas like Ghost in the Shell and Akira. But there weren't a whole lot of manga selection at that time, and a lot of the things that were being released were heavily edited or censored, which kind of sucked. But actually, one of my favorite manga at the time was Blade of the Immortal, otherwise known as Mugen no Junin in Japanese, which follows the adventure of a zombified Ronin samurai. So I was always sketching things like Blade of the Immortal in my notebooks in high school, but I was also producing my very own Dragon Ball Z fan manga. And I released 2 volumes of that, which I copied at my local church's copy machine for free, and sold them at school for about $2 a piece, and I made a decent chunk of change. So, as embarrassed as I am to look back at those things now, I had no idea that I would actually end up in Japan just a few years later, living here and working full-time as a manga assistant, and under one of the most legendary manga artists in Japan. So here is the story about how that all happened. So I graduate high school, I've done my Dragon Ball fan manga stuff. I am entering into art school, going to the Columbus College of Art and Design in 2002 to 2003. At the end of 2003, I stopped going to school there and I ended up transferring to another school in my hometown of Kentucky, which is also a design-related school. And all the while, I'm working the late shift at a Walmart, stocking produce. One night, a girl comes in and leaves her phone number to give to me to one of the other staff at Walmart. So I'm handed the phone number and I ended up calling her and we ended up dating. So this girl convinces me to move back to Columbus, Ohio, which is where I was previously going to school. So I moved back to Columbus and I'm reconnecting with some of my old friends that I hadn't spoken to in a while. And I'm thinking about maybe signing back up to go to school. Again, I've transferred to a different Walmart and I'm now stocking laundry detergent and fabric softener. This girl that I've moved up there for decides that she wants to invite her ex-boyfriend over to the house and kick me out. So, yay! I don't really have money to start going back to school. I'm kind of homeless. I'm basically homeless at this point. I can't stay at this house anymore, so I end up asking some of my friends if I can crash on their couch. So I end up kind of just couch surfing. Luckily, my good friend Will, who was my roommate in the dorm the previous years at this college, let me crash at his place. At least that was until we all got kicked out of that place too. So then I end up living with my bus driver, the bus driver that would drive me to Walmart every night. So yeah, it was a hard time. It was here at one of the lowest points of my life that all of this stuff started to come together. I was visiting the local library, the Columbus Public Library, the really big one that was downtown, to check out books and VHS tapes. Yeah, they still had a lot of VHS tapes floating around in the early 2000s. And I remember they had a decent selection of Heisei Godzilla movies, which I hadn't seen yet. Up until that point, they weren't released on DVD. So it was on this day that I found Godzilla vs. Biollante. So it was on this day that I was using one of the computers at the library because I didn't have a computer at my bus driver's apartment and there was no smartphones at this point. So I was using this public computer at the library. I had previously had a Japanese girlfriend, which I'm not going to get into all of that stuff, but I had an account on a Japanese pen pal website that I used to keep touch with some friends. I had that account open and I hadn't used it, but I had a lot of things linked there, like my old DeviantArt page and things like that. And so on this day that I've gone to rent Godzilla vs. Biollante, I get a message sent to me through my DMs on DeviantArt and it's from a Japanese girl I've never met before. She's writing saying that her friend had found my account on the other website. They liked my art. They were interested in corresponding with me and talking and exchanging letters and stuff like that. So I was like, oh, cool. This is, something positive and fun happening in this kind of dark area of my life. And so, yeah, I start to talk to this girl, and I start to go back to the library every day after my shift is over in the early morning and check my emails and DMs and, reply back and forth. Fast forward a little bit. At this point, we're both around 20 or 21 years old. She actually travels a lot and frequents the US and Canada as well. So she's planning a trip to the USA and wants to try somewhere new. And she decides that she wants to visit Columbus, Ohio. I know this is a long story. Just stick with me. Trust me. So she flies out, and we end up hanging out and falling in love. That's just how it goes. And she flies back to Japan, and then she flies back again over the holidays to meet my family, at this point in Kentucky. And she also invites her parents, which is a bit weird. So they come in at different times, but so I meet her and her parents. You can see where this is going. At this point, we've been talking online for about a year. We've been hanging out in person for a couple of months. We're young and stupid, and we're rushing things, and we decide, hey, let's get married. So I propose, and she accepts. And then I have to go over my game plan with her mom about what I'm going to do next. And this is me basically working the night shift at Walmart and living with my bus driver. So yeah, I'm kind of, scrambling to figure out what I want to do, young, dumb Americans. And it's literally at the end of her stay there. This is December of 2004. She hears from her friend who works with her in Japan at a Subway restaurant. Yes, Subway, they have those in Japan. That was her part-time job that she worked at while she was going to school. So anyway, her fellow sandwich artist's mother was the cleaning lady at a manga studio. Not just any manga studio, the manga studio of the legendary creator of Fist of the North Star, Tetsuo Hara. And get this, they're looking for foreigners to apprentice as manga assistants. So she asked me if I'm interested, and of course I'm interested. This is why I went to art school in the first place, to learn how to draw manga and to do animation and to make films and things like that. This was right up my alley. Of course, I would love to go to Japan, live there, and get paid to learn how to draw manga professionally while actually working on manga. So it was a no-brainer. But I had less than 2 weeks to get everything ready for the move. And thanks to a little help from my grandmother, I was able to afford the trip, fly to Japan, and have my interview with Tetsuo Hara himself with my really lame portfolio within 2 weeks of that call. Boy, was I nervous. This would have been my second time in Japan because I had come out here in 2003 with a previous girlfriend, and I had mostly stayed in the area of Gunma, which was kind of like Kentucky but Japan, if that makes any sense. And now I'm kind of in the western part of Tokyo, which is where a lot of the manga and anime stuff is. At least it had been from the 80s until the 90s. Now it's a little bit more spread out, but a lot of it's still based here in the west side of Tokyo. And I had to travel to a town I'd never been to before called Kichijoji, a really awesome town that I ended up living in for a couple of years. But yeah, I had my interview there at this big office building that was unmarked. There was no information about whether or not there, was a manga studio inside. So it just looked like a big business office, and there were other businesses on different floors, but a couple of the floors were strictly for this manga company. Rewind a little bit. My friend Will that I had stayed with previously when I was basically homeless, he had a copy of a magazine called Raijin Comics that I remember finding randomly one day and flipping through it, and it was an English translated version of Fist of the North Star, a new prequel comic called Fist of the Blue Sky, and some other stuff like City Hunter and some other things like that. And I remember kind of looking at it and going, oh yeah, I remember Fist of the North Star. I remember seeing that VHS tape at Blockbuster Video, but I never rented it. So, I wasn't all that interested in it. It was cool, and I was like, this kind of looks like Mad Max mixed with Bruce Lee. But yeah, I didn't think much of it, and, I read some of it and put it to the side. Forgot about it after that. Now all of that's coming back to me as I am approaching this place to have my interview. And on the flight there, I'd actually drawn a picture of Kenshiro for the very first time, which was in kind of my own style, but I was trying to replicate the really intricate cross-hatching and stuff that Tetsuo Hara is known for, and man, it sucked. So I was really, really nervous, thinking that this guy's gonna hate what I've drawn, he's not gonna accept me, and there's no way I'm gonna land this gig. Especially I'm used to drawing more of like kind of gag and funny type stuff, so you know, it's very different from what he draws. I put a portfolio together of my best work and I presented it to him one-on-one. I actually even drew a short gag comic about this whole situation and published it in an English-Japanese magazine based here in Tokyo called Metropolis. I also really don't like the way that that looks either. But to my surprise, he said okay. And after I'd secured all my visas and stuff and gotten married, I got to work. I remember showing up and basically none of the staff spoke English, but it was interesting to see how many people were actually working in this studio space. So I show up day one, and via Hara Tetsuo's instructions, I start to just practice basic things like drawing lines. And boy, do I draw a lot of lines. I basically spent, I believe, 2 weeks just practicing like cross-hatching, using the specific types of pens and nibs and inks that they would use in Japanese manga, which I had never used in my life, so this was all new to me. So yeah, I spent 2 weeks just drawing little cross-hatching lines. I'm sure I drew thousands and thousands, if not millions, of cross-hatching lines. And then they got me to do my first bit of work on the actual manga, which was drawing the coma lines, the border lines around the manga panels. And it was for this volume right here that I first got to draw some panel lines, although I seriously fucked them up and they had to be redone by one of the veteran artists. So sorry, man. Again, I'm not gonna name names, but yeah, they have to be so precise, like millimeters, you know, super, super precise lines. And if they were a little bit off, Hara-sensei could tell and he would say, no good, you gotta redo it, you gotta white it all out. Because this is like, these pages have already been drawn, 90% complete. And it's just got to be carefully whited out and then drawn back in. So there's probably still a little bit of the work that I did on those panel lines in this volume right here, but yeah, that was it for a while. So after that, I started to get a little bit better. They realized I probably shouldn't be handling panel lines, and I started to get better at the cross-hatching. So I got to do a little bit more background work, some little things here and there, you know, very, very minimal stuff. But then they learned that I had trained as a digital artist in college. So I had already experience with doing Photoshop and Illustrator, things like that. And they were one of the very first manga companies that were doing digital shading for the manga. So they quickly moved me over to the digital side, and I learned how to do the shading and stuff for the characters, specifically Kenshiro. This is a cover feature from Bunch Comics. This is the comic company that I worked for under Tetsuo Hara, and this is Kenshiro from Fist of the Blue Sky, which is a prequel to Fist of the North Star, and this is Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star's uncle, also named Kenshiro. The story takes place during World War II and is set mostly in China, so Kenshiro here is wearing Chinese garbs, kind of like an old school kung fu movie, which I was also a big fan of. A couple of the guys that were in charge of doing the digital coloring were Brazilian Japanese dudes that also spoke a little bit of English and were able to give me the basics because all of the computer menus were in Japanese. So I had to put posted up notes to show what the kanjis meant in English because this was before you had like Google Translate and things like that. I had a little pocket translator and I remember just using it to make the word Spider-Man because it said it really weird and it would say Spiderman. I thought that was hilarious for some reason. Spiderman. I have a lot more stories about all of this. If you would like to hear more, some more juicy information, some more insider stuff, some stuff I really don't want to share in public here on YouTube, click the link below and support me on Patreon because I've just put up another video that explains more about all of this, as well as some of that information that I don't really want to put publicly on YouTube. I heard him make a loud noise in Japanese. 5 seconds later, after I said a couple more things, a chair comes hurling my way. So if you're interested in that, for as little as $1 a week, have access to exclusive content and also have a chance to buy really cool stuff from Japan that you can't get anywhere else. I also sell a lot of Japanese toys and things there and go shopping for my Patreon members. So if you're interested in any of that, click the link below. Your support is much appreciated. If that's not something you're into, hey, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so and give this video a thumbs up so that more people see it. If there are specific questions you have about my experiences working at the manga studio, feel free to leave them down below. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.
So you worked for Tetsuo Hara?
Yeah.
And how did that go?
He was great. It was amazing to work for him.
Okay.
But there's other assistants that work with you.
Sure.
And it could be quite stressful with some of the other people you would work with.
Yeah, I've heard it's pretty stressful.
Yeah. Well, you don't sleep. You barely get paid. How
long did you do that for?
I did that for almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't even know it was still going on this currently. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
To me, Fist of the North Star is like the quintessential 80s.
Right.
It's like the Japanese manga equivalent of like an 80s action movie.
Right. The funny thing is, I was only familiar with the Fist of the North Star movie. I never read the manga.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't a big fan of it or anything. I was just jumped at the chance to work in a manga studio.
Sure.
And so I kind of did my research before I arrived.
Yeah.
And I brought my portfolio, which was pathetic.
Okay.
I'm very embarrassed about what I brought. But he kind of thumbed through it and was like, okay.
So but what did you like specialize in doing like backgrounds, or did you like, how did that work?
So at first, for 2 weeks, all I did was practice using the Japanese pens and like the traditional nibs and all those things, and just practicing lines. I probably drew thousands and thousands of lines,
Okay.
which to me actually was the hardest thing, because they had to be
boxes.
Yeah.
The panels, wow,
right? The panels, they were so precise. And if you made like a little like
sensei would tell you.
Or if you like someone bumped the table, you know, it'd be ruined.
God.
And I remember the first time I tried doing a page, I totally destroyed it. You know, it's already got a lot of the art complete on it. And I'm just going through and inking it.
Oh man.
And this guy named Matsumori, he had to
redo it.
He had to white out all of my work and then
he must have been so mad.
No, he was really nice about it. He was really nice about it. He was actually he was one of the stranger people, but he was always so nice.
Oh, I see.
But then they found out that I had been trained on computers in art school. And they were one of the first mangas that was actually using computers to do digital shading for like special effects and fabrics. And that ended up becoming my like main job there.
Kind of a digital colorist.
Right, digital colorist. But I was basically coloring screen tone.
Oh, wow.
And we'd print it out, cut it out, and stick it onto the actual physical page.
Wow, very analog.
Was pretty cool. Yeah,
That's
analog
amazing.
way of doing it. I had to use Photoshop to color, and it was all in kanji. All the menu was in kanji.
Yes.
So I had to put post-it notes to figure out what everything was.
Right. Sink or swim, man.
Yeah, it was pretty hardcore.
Sink or swim. That's amazing you got to see that.
Yeah, I never bring it up hardly anymore, but it's been so long ago. But yeah, it'd be nice to just kind of share some of those stories.
That's amazing. You got really like a view into a world most people, let alone foreign people,